Hello everyone, and welcome to Becoming Award Ready. I'm Michael David, and it is my pleasure to host today's webinar, which is being co-produced by the ACS Women's Chemist Committee and the ACS Board Committee on Grants and Awards and ACS Webinars. Now, how do deserving and accomplished chemists become ACS Award winners? Today, we will learn the key aspects of preparing for and creating a successful nomination package for an ACS National Award. The strategies discussed in this webinar are based on a recent ACS National Meeting session and will help enhance the quality, quantity, and diversity of nominations. Our two speakers will be Amanda Bryant-Friedrich, Dean of the College of Graduate Studies at the University of Toledo, and Les McGuire, Global Program Team Director at the Novartis Pharmaceutical Corporation. Our moderator for today will be Amber Charlebois, Chair of the ACS Women's Chemist Committee and a lecturer in the Department of Chemistry at SUNY College at Geneseo. And now I'm pleased to turn the time over to Amber to get today's presentation started.
Thank you, Mike. Today's webinar follows up on recent ACS National Meeting activities centered around finding solutions for increasing both the quantity and the quality of national ACS award nominations for women and underrepresented groups. In Philadelphia, the Women Chemist Committee distributed wallet periodic table cards with a very important message on the reverse side. The message is shown here. ACS National Award nominees were 17% for female for 2017, compared to 14% female in 2016. ACS membership is 29% female. More nominations are still needed. Nominate a woman chemist for an award this November. As recent ACS comments in Chemical and Engineering News highlighted, we need more nominees from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups and from industry as well. We want today to be a discussion as well as a presentation. Let's get the audience involved and ask them a question. Mike, what is our first poll question of the day?
First question, very simple. Do you know anyone who deserves to receive an ACS National Award? Now, when these poll questions pop up, you can just click directly on that blue screen in front of you to let us know what you think. And I'm just going to give you a few seconds to enter in your response. And we're quickly coming up on the majority of the audience, you all having voted. So I'm going to close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And pretty good numbers. 46% of you all said yes. 46% also said possibly, and I'm here to find out how. And only 8% said they currently don't know of anyone. So with that, I think we'll continue on with the presentation.
During the national meeting in Philadelphia, there was an interactive panel discussion, Increasing Successful Nominations from Underrepresented Groups, sponsored by the ACS Women Chemist Committee, the ACS Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Board, and the ACS Board Committee on Grants and Awards. The panel discussion highlighted 3 key points. The nomination and selection of awards are serious, professional, and important processes. These processes all fit together in a comprehensive and cohesive manner, and understanding the entire nomination and selection process and where things can go wrong will provide a sense of what will get results. Mike, let's find out a little bit more about today's audience. What is the second poll question?
Okay, our second question is, have you ever nominated anyone for an ACS National Award? And 4 possible responses here. Yes, you have nominated people multiple times before. Yes, you've nominated a person once before. No, you've never nominated anyone, but you're planning on doing it now. And no, you've never nominated anyone and probably will not. Thank you all for responding so quickly. I'm going to close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, I think we have an ideal audience today. 62% have not nominated anyone, but are planning on doing it in the near future, and 24% have nominated people multiple times. So let's keep it rolling.
The panel in Philadelphia also discussed what it takes to become award ready, the topic for today's webinar. 2 of the panelists are with us today to expand on that discussion. We welcome your questions and comments once our presenters are finished. Dr. Amanda Bryant-Friedrich is the Dean of the College of Graduate Studies and Associate Professor at the University of Toledo. She is also involved with the Association for Women in Science, AWIS, and has much experience and passion around increasing the number of awards to women and underrepresented groups through her work with that group. Amanda will discuss the big picture approach to becoming award ready with respect to both the nominator and the nominee. Dr. Les McGuire is a global program team director and program management unit head in oncology at Novartis Pharmaceutical. He is also very active in the ACS at both the national and the local levels, specifically with the ACS Fellows Program and award committees. He is a successful nominator and has been involved in many selection committee processes as well. Les will discuss the nuts and bolts of what a successful nomination package looks like and will give you insight into the entire process. And now I'd like to turn it over to Amanda for her presentation.
So thank you very much for joining us today. Attending this webinar is, of course, a very important step in making sure that you are either award ready, or if you know someone who's award ready, that you know how to make sure that they can actually get that award that they deserve. Getting recognized for hard work is a very important part of the scientific enterprise. And so all of those who are actually eligible for awards should get them. So as we go through the presentation, I want to make you aware of a few things. This part of the presentation was designed to provide information to those who are underrepresented in the pool of applicants considered for these prestigious awards given by the American Chemical Society. Of course, however, these principles can be used to increase the success of those who are currently well represented in these pools, as well as applicants from other societies who are looking for these career-changing recognitions. So before we get into the meat of the matter, we need to ask ourselves, why are underrepresented minorities not the recipients of scientific awards? Is it because basically we don't apply? If we never enter the race, we can't win it. So we'll talk about why members of underrepresented groups just don't apply for awards in chemistry. Does it have to do with bias? Bias is something that has been noted in the literature, and because scientific awards are given based on meritorious steps across a period of time, bias can creep into the process early on and can have a significant impact on the credentials of a potential applicant, as well as their belief that they are worthy of the award. The other question is, can we contribute this to the fact that we just don't have the rule book? The nomination process, which Les will talk about in great detail, is not for those who are faint of heart. It takes a great deal of study to understand the clear-cut logistics of the process, and even time and effort to discover the nuances of being successful. We will discuss how many of those from underrepresented minority groups perceive this process and why the information may sometimes be hard to obtain. Some of this can be attributed to a lack of outreach by the organizations to the places where these underrepresented minorities reside. So who actually needs to know about the excellent work that you do, or the excellent work that the person that you want to nominate does? Even though awards are given on merit, an expert has to be the voice that makes others aware of the meritorious nature of the work to be recognized. It's much easier for this to happen when the potential applicant is part of the network and the machine that created the process and runs the machine. This can start early in the career of a scientist through mentoring. We'll discuss the need for the metamorphosis of the mentoring role and its expansion to make sure that applicants are award ready. Let's address the first question. Why do we not apply? Well, you can see that early on in the presentation, 17% of ACS National Award nominees were female, with an overall membership of females in the society being about 29%. There are currently no numbers available about other underrepresented groups in chemistry. So there are many, many reasons why women and underrepresented minorities don't participate in awards, but also in other parts of the scientific enterprise, which some of us may think of as mainstream. So we need to think about things such as imposter syndrome, that whole idea that someone's actually going to find out one day that you don't actually belong. So how can you actually reveal your qualifications if you don't believe in your qualifications yourself? Many people, female and underrepresented groups, have experienced microaggressions along the pathway that make them feel like that they may just not be good enough to be receiving an award. There's also that general feeling among members of these groups that they're just not valued and that they just don't belong. So it's a part of the responsibility of the group itself to make sure that these individuals don't get this impression. One of the other things that you see is that if the award winners in the past don't look like you, then you have the impression that maybe from a perspective of race and ethnicity, that you won't be favorably considered. And as we can see at the bottom of the slide from the Priestley medalists, we have 1 woman and we have 5 men, and all of the men appear to be Caucasian. So if someone, a young minority person, is looking at that, they may never aspire to obtaining such an award because they don't feel like they look like the current pool. There's also the issue of pedigree. Many awards are given based on pedigree. And from a historical perspective, we know that many members of underrepresented groups don't belong to those pedigrees. And so that becomes an important issue. So one thing that's documented very well in the literature is that women and underrepresented minorities never feel like they're good enough. They feel like they're never ready, that their paper is never complete or polished enough, or that their packet is not strong enough. Without insightful mentoring, champions, and advocates, there's no external voice there to realistically lay out the process and the qualifications that are needed for success. There are no informal conversations that lead to the understanding of what really success looks like. A broader conversation on priorities is something that we need to have. Many members of underrepresented groups pay a high social tax simply for caring about their communities and the members of the groups with whom they identify. This differential in priorities can be all-consuming. It's important that if seeking an award is an important thing to you, or if it's important to someone that you feel like you should nominate, then you have to help them see where the priorities are. This shift in priorities does not have to be permanent, or it can be redirected to increase the impact of the science. So that's an important issue that some seem to overlook. So bias is real. It's not something that we can avoid talking about. And this graphic that appeared in the September 5th issue of New York Times actually gives us a very good picture of that. Now, when I first looked at the picture, I guess I'm not very gifted in graphics. I couldn't see the little lady in the picture, but I see a woman in there now, and I can understand now the whole perspective of this picture. And it was actually talking about the lack of female speakers at prominent conferences in the field of neuroscience. And so why am I talking about this if we're talking about awards? Conscious bias, implicit bias, any kind of bias has an impact on our decisions to include or to exclude. It impacts our ability to invite or to alienate. It actually also impacts our ability to elevate or to deflate others. There are no underrepresented minorities on the panel, and none that have received awards in the past, making the lack of critical mass a key factor. The lack of numbers has a very large impact on our decision making. As an underrepresented minority, one has to determine how to exist in a system that consciously or unconsciously does not want you or does not recognize you. It is the job of the members of our groups to educate and be aware of biases at all intersections of scientific careers. In some ways, the award can be considered the pinnacle of not only doing excellent work, but overcoming biases at every level in every activity that creates your scientific persona. If your research is not funded, if your publications are not favorably reviewed, and you're not allowed to speak at that important conference, your success is actually condemned. The remedy to this is to limit the impact of bias in all scientific endeavors through training, mentoring of those who we want to see represented in our fields, championing anyone who is worthy and advocating for their inclusion in the review panel or as a speaker at a symposium. These activities from subject experts and respected members of the scientific community lend credibility to those who may not have started with the right pedigree or have been excluded from the conversation but have succeeded in spite of it all. If organizations want to increase the number of underrepresented minority applicants for awards, there need to be transparent processes. The American Chemical Society has created incredibly transparent processes that help individuals know exactly what they need in order to become successful applicants. But is that information available at the institutions and at the places where underrepresented minorities and women are? It's really important that our organizations go out, that they give that information to the population that they're interested in, and then it becomes the responsibility of the potential applicant or the advocates or champions or mentors of those applicants to make sure that they become engaged in that information and start to look at how they can become successful. Another thing that would be very important here for a large organization like the American Chemical Society is to make the public aware of what has hindered the positive review of the nomination packages from any groups, because that then gives the nominator, the applicant, and all of those involved in the process an idea as to where some of the issues may lie. Mentors, coach, advocates, and sponsors. That is the key message that I want you to leave with today, that each one of those positions has a very important place in the successful inclusion of underrepresented minorities in the award pool. By definition, a mentor is someone who teaches or gives help to a less experienced individual. So that is something that can happen throughout your career, from K through 12 all the way up through the Nobel Prize. The mentoring has to occur. While a coach is someone who helps to improve your skill set. So the coaching in the process of career building through helping with the package preparation and all of the other pieces, by becoming award ready, the mentor is there to provide the advice that you need to make sure that you're at the right conferences, publishing in the right journals, and making good decisions. A coach makes sure that your publications are written in a way that reaches a broad audience and shows the high impact of the work. And they make sure that your abstracts draw attention and that your presentations hit the mark. An advocate, on the other hand, is willing to step in and say that he or she supports the vision of your work and believes that you are moving to the right direction and should be noticed. Sponsorship is the big one. That's your nominator. That person is willing to invest their social capital in you as an individual to make sure that you gain the recognition that you need to achieve. So these positions are important for the persons who want to nominate. These positions are important for the person who is applying to always understand these important areas in the future of an awardee. So then there's the machine. The machine is an important piece. And if you look at the very center of the slide, you see the assembly line. You see the assembly line has pieces that are going through production. All of the right pieces are in the right place. And there are very highly trained individuals there who can put those pieces together to make an incredibly good product. And in the background, you see the network. You see a network of people who are connected through many, many different kinds of pathways. These two things are the things that work together to make sure that the correct people gain the recognition they deserve. So if you're not a part of that network, if you're not a part of that machine, then you need to find a way to create your own machine. We're all scientists, we're all inventors, so we should be able to do that. It may not be easy, but it's something that we should aspire to, because we all need this machine to help us to be successful. Are you award ready? So the questions that you need to answer when you think you may be award ready is, do you believe that you are doing great science? If you believe passionately in your own heart that you are doing great science, then you need to let someone else know that. And then that person then can help to mentor you and champion you, because you can't gain awards in isolation. You also have to look at your work very critically. Is it creative? One of the things that I hear anecdotally is that I hear that the creativity of the work that's coming from underrepresented minorities is just not there. If you feel like there are issues with the creativity involved in your work, then go out and ask somebody, because that's going to be important for you to get a feel for whether or not you're really award ready. The other thing is, does anyone know what you're doing? If no one knows what you're doing, you're not going to get an award. So you have to really start to think about those 4 people, the sponsor, the advocates, the champions, and the mentors. Do you have them, and are they doing their job? And if they're not doing their job, then maybe you need to go find somebody else. And are you prepared to let others know how great you are? Being an underrepresented woman and a person who has been inside and outside the country, I know that that is something that a lot of people have a problem with, tooting their own horn, especially those from underrepresented groups. You have to be prepared in a very particular kind of way to be able to step forward and say, yes, I may be different, but yes, I'm prepared to let you know that I am great. So after hearing all of those things, the most important question remains, are you award ready? Mike, let's find out.
So we would want to ask all of you right now, are you award ready? And the results are coming in, and I'm going to close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And 26% of our audience has said, yes, you are. 9% said you're almost ready. 39% said maybe not right now, but you will be. And 26% are more interested in nominating somebody else. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Les McGuire to continue our presentation.
For me, I've really one message, and I'm going to say it several times, and that is that the nomination packages are important, or indeed vital. There's no denying that the fundamental excellence in the science is vital. But the nomination package, the letter, the biography, etc., are the lens that brings that science and that effort into focus. It highlights the excellence, it puts it in context, and it's the nomination packages that help get people awards. Certainly, nomination packages are going to require some time and some effort, but the people you're nominating have spent a lifetime working and dedicating themselves to the science. It seems only appropriate that we spend some of that same time and energy in nominating them. The effort is also well worth it because we're helping our society recognize excellence. And I can't think of many more things that I'd rather do. As I say, the scientific excellence is a given, but the nomination needs to put the work into context. And that is some understanding of the historical context. What happened before this? What has happened since that builds on it? How does this relate to other aspects and other work in the field? What did the nominee do? What were their contributions and what was the impact? Nomination should certainly attempt to put the nominee in the best possible light. Make them look as good as possible. Obviously, we want them to be honest and accurate, but we need to choose examples, choose letters, design the package so that it shows off what they have done. Many other nominees will have done tremendous things. If you're only showcasing half of what the person has done, chances are they're going to struggle to win the award. Nominations should focus on the positive and should highlight the candidate or the nominee as well as they possibly can. Now, this all sounds like a lot of work, and in some ways it is, but I would suggest to you that we know how to highlight people, and we know how to highlight their strengths and achievements. We do it all the time. We just don't necessarily think of it as always being directly applicable to nominations for ACS National Awards. But those things are not that different from many things that you do. Reference letters for students, for jobs, for positions as postdocs or graduate students. And you wouldn't have any doubt in your mind that the type of letter that you would write for someone going off to graduate school would be different for someone than you would write for someone who's looking for their first job in industry. So you know how to write reference letters. You know how to showcase the skills of a student. I suspect that many of us have done it in the context of promotion packages, whether it's academic promotions or promotions elsewhere, special awards and recognitions, whether it's Employee of the Month, Do It Awards, Above and Beyond Awards. Maybe they only involved relatively minor gift tokens, etc. but those sort of nominations involve many of the same skills and activities that we need to apply to national awards. ACS Fellows nominations, hopefully many of you have been involved in those. Perhaps you feel I've spent all my time focused on my professional activities. Well, I'm sure there you've had to write reports and updates on grants or projects. I know I do. In our CVs, resumes, etc., we also do a pretty good job, hopefully, of showcasing our activities. Even scientific publications rely on the same strengths. This idea of focusing in on themes, key activities, key impact, putting the whole thing in context. Academics' websites, if you look at them, they're often structured to showcase what their group does and their strengths. So I would suggest to you that although nomination packages can be a bit of work, it's work that you're familiar with, and indeed I suspect already somewhat expert. Let's actually take a look at that in this poll and just see how many of us have been involved in documents that I would suggest help us understand how to write a nomination.
We're just curious to know, which of these documents have you written? And for this question, you can enter more than one response. So you can click all of them or none of them. Have you ever written a reference letter, a nomination for a special award or recognition, a report or update on a project or grant, or a scientific publication? A little over half have voted, so I'm going to start the shutdown process and close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it is looking like we have some authors in the audience. 94 have written a scientific publication, 87% have written a report, 74 have written a nomination, and 84 have written a reference letter. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Les.
Wonderful. So I would suggest to you that we're well on the way. It's not that you're not familiar with the process. Maybe there's just some hints and tips and some things that you haven't thought about that we can perhaps apply. Firstly, I would suggest that we plan a nomination, just as you would plan a paper or a talk. We have to do the homework. We have to do the pre-work. Think about why the nominee is appropriate for this specific award. There are many ACS awards, and indeed there are many possible things that the nominee could be nominated for. But choose the most appropriate one. In many ways, if you're nominating them for the wrong award, as it were, you're wasting a lot of people's time and effort, and they'll be disappointed. Remember, it's going to be challenging to get an award. It's going to be doubly challenging if they're being nominated for an award that's not appropriate. Think about what the key themes of the work is. What are the thrusts? What are the main aspects? Who are some of the potential nominees and supporters? Are the nomination letters for previous awards available? Were they successful? Are they good? And then, of course, really homework-like, but check the requirements of the nomination. The ACS nomination rules are pretty standard, but if you're applying for other awards, make sure you know about word limits, the numbers of supporting letters, deadlines, any other peculiarities of the award. But planning is going to be vital. And planning because you're going to need to paint a complete picture so that the award panel doesn't have to. Your job, or the nominator's job, is to give the award panel all of the information they need. And some of this now touches a little bit on what Amanda was talking about. The panelists have been selected because they know the general scientific area, but they may not be experts. But they may know enough to fill in gaps if you leave them. And so you can think where you start to get worried in this list. I know the work. I know the topic area. I know, saw, or have met the nominee. I know their department. I know their mentor. I've heard about them. At some point, it just doesn't feel quite as objective as we would like. And that is, at least in part, our job as the nominators, to fill in these gaps. The panel are experts. They know a lot about this. But the reality is, you, the nominee, and hopefully people writing the support letters, know more. Put it in context for them. Tell them everything they need to know. And build a complete package. Don't think of this as simply calling up 3 people and asking them to write letters. Homework continues. The decision is going to be based on the whole package. Just as you would coach a student who was applying to some job, that cover letter with a few sentences is just as much a part of their interview application as the essays or CV or whatever they're submitting. Similarly here, think about all of the pieces, the citation, the biography, the publications, and then the letters. Tailor all of it to the specific award. Ensure that you've really addressed all of the criteria. Individual letters do not have to address all aspects of the nominee's work. If you have several letters, they should be different. This is the opportunity to highlight different aspects of the nominee's work. Sure, they should all share some of the main themes, but you certainly don't want the letters to be the same. Think quite seriously about who can best discuss different aspects of the work. Is there a mentor, someone from a previous organization that could be particularly helpful? Once you've identified the letter writers, share some of the main themes of the package with them. Tell them we're going to be focusing on A, B, C, D, and E, but then try to encourage them to focus on 2 or 3 of those aspects. The letters themselves should be organized, they should be clear, they should be powerful. I've seen a couple of examples where letter writers have simply cut and pasted from some master letter. If you see whole sections of a paragraph that are common to all letters, that's not good. Be specific. Avoid generalizations. He or she is excellent. He or she is outstanding. In what? Be specific. Make every sentence count. Indeed, make every word count. Have a solid opening, expand a few key points in the main body, and then close again with a summary, reminding of why it ties to the award. Organize it so that the letter is easily understood. If that means section headings or clearly paragraphs associated with different themes, do it. Write for a scientist who is not necessarily an expert on the topic. You want it to be as easy for them to understand where the information is, how all of these letters tie together and tie to the main theme. Just a minor point, but the quality of the letters also reflect on the nominee. Remember, if you're writing a letter, that many of the leaders or experts in the field will actually see these letters. It's important that they're good. Get feedback, both on your style of writing and the quality, but also on the content. You can certainly ask people around you, how does this read? Are there typos? Talk to other colleagues about the content. Talk to the nominee. Have you missed something significant? Polish, 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 much as you would a journal article or your own promotion package. Because ultimately, it's the quality of the letters that'll help determine the outcome. And then don't forget the other bits and pieces, being dismissive unfairly, other things that are part of the package. The CV, the resume, the short citation, all of these are important. All of them should be tailored to the award. And remember the themes of the nomination. Potentially reorganize some of those documents so that they mirror your main themes. Take a look at the selected publications. Are they related to this nomination? Are they appropriate for the award, or are there different publications that should be highlighted? If you've listed, or in some awards you can list publications and presentations, are they structured to mirror the nomination? If they're just listed historically, it may be hard for someone to pick out the key things that relate to the nomination. Amanda also talked about the machine. You can, of course, build your own machine. Just because you're not part of the machine, maybe there's an opportunity to build one. And I would say, in my experience, a number of universities have a machine. And actually a couple of companies, industrial companies, have essentially a machine for at least a couple of awards. So they track the awards, they know their requirements, they know their deadlines, they know their dates. I've had emails from people in the past saying, just checking that this will be the year award X is due. Is the deadline really November 30th? Whatever the date is. And these groups then identify appropriate potential nominees. They keep nomination packages on file. They're constantly working to update them. They reuse, they polish, they enhance so that they can include any new achievements. The point is, you can build a machine. I would say there are definitely places that have done that, and it's certainly an option for you. You and your colleagues gain more familiarity with the process. It becomes so much easier when you have a stock of successful award nominations to look back on. So I would just say in summary, you do have to plan. It's going to be significant time and commitment, but I think it's well worth it, because ultimately a successful nomination can start with one person, and you could be that person. Thank you, and I'll hand it back to Mike to take us to the next stage.
I just wanted to remind you that nominations for the 2018 ACS National Awards close on November 1st and can be submitted at www.nominate.acs.org. And with that, Amber, I'd like to throw it to you to take our first question.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Amanda and Les, for sharing your insights and advice on becoming award ready for national awards, as well as other awards that can recognize our accomplishments and advance our careers. Now let's get the audience involved in the discussion. I have one question from Kim, and this question is for Amanda. Kim asks, many of us have successfully found good mentors. Do you have any advice on how one might find an advocate?
Oh, that's a great question. One of the things that you would have to remember is that your mentor is a resource. And mentors are often very good at identifying people who can help to advance your cause or get you closer to an award. The other thing that you can do, especially through the American Chemical Society, we have so many opportunities to get ourselves out there, to get our work seen at the meetings, in the journals, and that of our students. And believe it or not, our students can be some of the best advocates that we can find because they really want to see us successful. So they can actually create passion within an individual about your work. So you're always looking for those opportunities. Never shy away from going up to an individual who is extremely knowledgeable in your field and letting them hear you talk about what you're doing so that you can show them your enthusiasm. You can show them how impactful your work is. And then you're starting to create an advocate. You may not even know sometimes that that advocate is yours. Sometimes they advocate for you without you even knowing, but you start to reap the benefits of that along the line. So it's all about exposure. You really need to make sure that you're getting out there, you're talking to your mentor. Don't forget your champions too, because those individuals will also talk about you at situations where you may not even be there and say, you know, this great person over here at this institution is doing work in this area, and I really saw a great talk by that individual last night. So it's all about being out there and being exposed.
Thank you, Amanda. Les, this question is from Donna. She has actually two questions. One is, how important is who writes the nomination letter versus what is in the nomination letter? And then she followed that up with, is it helpful to highlight in your letter that this candidate is a member of a certain underrepresented group and has been overlooked by the award in the past, i.e., no woman has ever won this award?
Yes. So I think the content of the letter is more important than the letter writer. I have certainly seen letters from very, 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 very prominent scientists, and they haven't added anything to the discussion. They're not focused enough. I think if you have someone who can write a good letter that showcases your work, that is the most important thing. That's key. And I would also suggest that it's probably easier to coach someone like that than the Nobel Prize winner. It's probably hard to actually talk to them and say, look, I really need you to focus on this and this. They're going to kind of write what they want. So I would focus on choosing people who can write effectively about your work. They're knowledgeable. And maybe those people who you can coach and direct a little bit about where you'd like them to focus. To your second point, I'd be interested in hearing what others think. What's important in the letters is the quality of the science and the quality of the work that's gone on, and perhaps also the challenges that they faced. I think it's quite acceptable in a letter to say, you know, the person has been doing this for several years and there was this obstacle and this challenge and so forth. I personally am not sure how I'd react to sort of something so explicit as a woman hasn't been nominated for this award in 25 years. You can turn that around and talk of the challenges and how they've persevered, etc. I think my first answer was pretty good. I think I'm a little bit weaker on the second one. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment or if you have something you want me to focus on a little bit more.
I'd be willing to take a crack at that a little bit. So I don't think the second part of the question, just stating that someone comes from an underrepresented group, is the important factor. But I did mention in my part of the presentation about the social tax. And so if an individual has actually then contributed significantly to the scientific community by supporting the efforts of those from an underrepresented group or the community from which they come, then they have paid that social tax. And that may have or may not have impacted the science itself. It could have even been a major contributor, because sometimes, even in my own world, I've brought in incredibly gifted underrepresented minority students who have actually then advanced the work in my lab. But of course, by taking in students and larger numbers sometimes than I would want to, because they wish to work with someone who looks like them, that can also set you back a little bit. So having that perspective is probably the most important part. Not everyone has that. So the nominator in that case has to put all of that in perspective to make the panel who's going to make the determination actually understand how excellent the science is in the context of the environment in which it was done.
Awesome. Amanda, is it assumed that the person is promoting herself for the nomination? Who is preparing the nomination package? So I think this asks the question, and this is from Marion, self-nominations, that kind of thing. So can you respond, Amanda, please?
Whether or not you're actually preparing the papers in the end, you are actually preparing your own nomination by making sure that the individual who is going to submit it has all of the information that they need. Sometimes that means that you have to do a lot on educating the individual on the whole you instead of just the scientific part of you. So promoting yourself, that word is one of those things that sometimes we take as not being very positive, but it is positive, so you have to remember that too. If you're actually self-nominating, you have to be able to write very convincingly about your own capabilities and your own eligibility to be successful at the award. So at the ACS, I believe, and Les is going to correct me on this if I'm wrong, that the package is actually prepared somewhat by the nominator and somewhat by the individual. I mean, it's very difficult for a nominator to be able to write everything, and then of course there are the letters of support. But Les, could you speak to that a little bit more about actually who's doing the paperwork?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I think the amount of information that you need to supply and the context, I think the nominee ends up being involved. I would hope that the nominators, the people writing the letters, are doing a lot of the letter writing themselves, but they've been given a lot of the information. And we also talked about the fact that it has to be a package. So there needs to be someone at the center kind of coordinating this thing a little bit. Otherwise, the letters are all going to talk about the Nature paper, the Science paper, and the JACS paper, and they're going to miss all of the other stuff. And I think that was the bit that I was trying to get to in my piece, that it's the whole, it's that whole package. You should be looking at each letter as an opportunity to highlight different pieces. So I think you need someone kind of centrally organizing this and kind of coaching the other people that are writing letters. Whether the nominee is writing everything themselves or not, I think they're very involved. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you look at a lot of these awards, you have to supply resumes and CVs, so I think it's assumed that the nominee is involved in the process.
Awesome. Thank you, Les. Amanda, in your presentation, you talked about, does anybody know what you are doing? In other words, kind of being, public and out there. So for the question, does anyone know what you are doing? That's actually difficult to say yes when you're working in industry. Are the awards biased towards academia versus industry? And can you shed some advice on that?
I'll speak first and then I'm sure Les can weigh in, but within the corporate structure, I think sometimes it's even the person who's the potential nominee, people really know more even about what they're doing within the corporate structure than we do if we're in academics, because there's a lot of reporting that goes on and there's a lot of accountability. So when someone makes a really impactful and significant contribution, then the company and the people who do the nomination there, that machine has to be in place because it is a different way. But I can definitely see there that the people in the company can contribute greatly to the preparation of the package, making sure that the contribution is put in context. Les, what do you think about that?
I think the challenge is that so many of the awards are for individuals. You have a number of team awards, and industry is comfortable with that. The Heroes in Chemistry, for example, some of the companies have become really efficient at nominating people for that. But for these individual awards, people in industry just see themselves differently. We've led large teams. People on the teams should be recognized. I think the academics, we sort of ignore the postdocs, the graduate students, all of those people that contributed. So we're quite comfortable giving the academics an individual award. Obviously it involved a lot of those other students. I think industry, the team leaders are uncomfortable. They're not going to put themselves forward or allow themselves to be put forward for an individual award because they're going to recognize that it was a team kind of thing. So I think there's a challenge. I mean, industry is obviously massively underrepresented in the award recipients, but I think it's probably more about the number of awards that we have. It's very hard to get industry nominated for individual awards.
So Amanda followed up on that same question, asking about the lack of a publishing record for somebody working in industry versus academia. So do either of you have any suggestions for candidates who do not have a strong publication record?
So I mean, I think the point is define strong. If an individual, and you see this with industry, they have a handful of publications, they have a handful of patents, but each of those are the culmination of several years' work with a large group of co-workers that resulted in a compound that went into clinic or was really advanced. I think those are extremely impactful, powerful papers, but it's going to be hard to ever put someone who's got 3J Med Chem papers and a bioorganic letters paper up with someone from an academic side where they have a vast array of publications. It's just different. The approaches are different.
And I think, Les, too, this is where the team comes in with the mentor, the champion, the advocates, and the sponsors, because you have to have a lot of different perspectives around that individual to make sure that even if the publications are not at the same kind of caliber or whatever you want to say as those from academics, the research is just as impactful. And so if you have that strong group of individuals helping to move that nomination forward, I think that person can still have just as good of a chance. I mean, it's not all based on metrics to say that the impact factors are all here, here, and here. It should be a total picture. And so I would imagine that could be very helpful.
Thank you. There were a couple questions from Matthew and Donna that talked about logistics of the awards, and I'm certainly going to pass those questions forward to the awards group at ACS and see if we can't get the website tweaked a little so it's more informative up in the front end. Matthew, thank you for that suggestion. Also, be looking for future programming for award representation from industry. I believe there's going to be some programming at future meetings, really looking at this idea of increasing the number of awards for people from industry. So Amanda and Matthew, thank you for those comments as well. I'd like to say thank you, Les and Amanda, very, very much for your words of wisdom. And if I could just recap some of the key points about becoming award ready as we finish out the webinar here. We need to engage nominators and nominees in efforts to communicate the opportunities and the criteria to a broad pool of candidates. We need to understand the nomination and the selection processes. We need to prepare targeted quality nomination packages, and we need to minimize the impact of inherent bias. We also need to find mentors, champions, and advocates for a broad pool of candidates. In closing, we need to continue our efforts to become more award ready so that all of us, regardless of our group or sector, can experience the excitement of having our accomplishments and contributions be recognized as nominees and award winners. By increasing the quality, the quantity, and diversity of nominations of underrepresented groups, we can reflect the society's core value of diversity and inclusion.
And I would like to thank Amanda, Les, and Amber for their contributions today, as well as the ACS Women's Chemist Committee and the ACS Board Committee on Grants and Awards for co-producing the webinar for today. And that wraps us up. So on behalf of all of us here at ACS, we'd like to thank you for tuning in and hope to see you in the future.